Mr. Chairman.
Tracy Martin.
Take a short call in part 2 of the Social Housing Reform, Flexible Purchasing and Remedial Matters Bill. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to see the Minister in the chair there. Hopefully the Minister could expand on some explanation around what's happening there, particularly in subpart 2, Housing Corporation Act Changes 1974. And I refer specifically to section 18(2)J after related to housing insert, but not for the purpose of advising the Minister of Housing on those matters. And from a New Zealand First perspective, we see this as we're not 100% convinced by the reasoning given for the shift of this advice to another organisation. My first question would be, what did the Housing Corporation do to the Minister that she no longer wants to put into legislation that they should be the ones advising her or this government about housing? I mean, Housing Corporation has an extensive institutional knowledge around the history of social housing in this country, about the needs of social housing in this country. Why would the Minister, I beg your pardon, why would the Minister and this government put into the legislation that this organisation is not to advise the Minister of Housing? Now, it doesn't mean that you can't seek advice from other people. There's nothing there. You don't need to put into legislation that the Minister must only seek advice from the Housing Corporation, but it bemuses us as to why an organisation that is entrenched in New Zealand history and has seen and has institutional knowledge about what used to be, what is currently there, about the pressures out there, even though we would have to say that the measuring about the pressures out there is completely abysmal, because what is happening in our area is that there are institutions, organisations, NGOs saying don't bother telling the Housing Corporation of New Zealand that you need a house, because actually there's no way on this planet that you're going to get one under this government. So the need is not being clearly reflected. And perhaps that may be a reason why the Minister has decided that advice needs to come from somewhere else. But it's a little bit like other pieces of legislation we've seen in this House. It's the removal of the requirement to seek advice from. It's the removal of somebody's role who actually has institutional knowledge to advise. So we see this as subpart 2 as being a really interesting place to go, and I certainly would welcome the opportunity for the Minister to rise and actually address that. With regard to subpart 3 and the amendments to the KiwiSaver Act 2006, we're seeing some other changes around the KiwiSaver Act, and none of them are actually to the benefit of the purpose that the KiwiSaver was set up to start with. The purpose of KiwiSaver was to incentivise and encourage New Zealanders to save towards their own retirement. I mean, I was the generation, I'm slightly older than the Minister, but I am slightly older than the Minister. She may look younger, a lot younger than me, but I'm slightly older. But anyway, we are of the generation that were told in the 1990s there would be no retirement for us. There would be none. We were on our own. Have at it. But KiwiSaver came along as one of those backstops to start to encourage generations such as myself and then future generations to make sure we were able to somehow support ourselves. This clause, giving the capacity to completely remove KiwiSaver for a period of time or any of your savings in there to put into housing, is robbing Peter to pay Paul, sir. So from our perspective, subpart 3 is not an answer to the housing crisis or the inability of young New Zealanders to actually afford to purchase housing. It's not a true answer. So we would again seek some clarity from the Minister as to why this government believes that actually allowing people to dip into a Peter bucket to pay into a Paul bucket is logical at this time, when we know, as Mr Hipkins said, we're going to have to make some adjustments, and New Zealand First has its own theories about the adjustments that need to be made, as our population ages and goes forward and more stress is placed upon that part of our taxation system. And I think finally the subpart 1, Goods and Service Tax Act 1985, there's nothing, personally I can't find anything controversial in that particular area there. I guess what we're saying is that when the government actually seeks a service from somebody else, they don't have to pay the tax. At the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money. I can appreciate that taxpayers don't want to be paying again. I guess it's taking from one bucket and sticking into another, and that creates an administrative cycle. So, on behalf of New Zealand First, just in closing, we would certainly seek some clarity around subpart 2 from the Minister if she was able to talk to us about why you'd remove it.
The Honourable Fulgoff.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.